It was a chilly evening, and I was driving back home after a long day at work. The road was dark and empty, with nothing but the occasional streetlight to guide my way. I was tired, and all I wanted was to get home and rest. But as I drove, I noticed something strange. The road seemed to stretch on forever, and the streetlights were getting farther and farther apart. I began to feel uneasy, but I told myself it was just my imagination. I had driven this road many times before, and it had never seemed so long and empty. But the feeling of unease only grew stronger, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Suddenly, my car sputtered and died. I was stranded, in the middle of nowhere, with no cell phone signal and no one to help me. I got out of the car and started walking, hoping to find a gas station or a place to call for help. But as I walked, the road seemed to disappear, and I found myself wandering in a vast, empty space. I was lost in a liminal space, a place between the real world and the unknown. I didn't know what to do. The fear began to take hold. I was alone, in a place where time seemed to stand still. I didn't know if I would ever find my way back home. As I wandered through the liminal space, I began to see strange things. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and whispers filled the air. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the sound made my skin crawl. I was starting to think that I would never find my way out of this place. But then, I saw a light in the distance. It was faint, but it was the first sign of hope I had seen since my car broke down. I started walking towards the light, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I realized it was a gas station. I began to run, desperate for help. But as I got closer, the gas station seemed to shift and change. The walls became distorted, and the lights flickered. Then I hesitated, unsure of what to do. But I had no choice. I had to go inside and ask for help. As I entered the gas station, I was greeted by a strange man. He had a grin on his face that made me uneasy, and he seemed to know who I was. He told me that he had been waiting for me, and that I was never going to leave this place. I was trapped in the liminal space, and I didn't know how to escape. The man's laughter filled the air, and I realized that I was in more danger than I ever thought possible. As the strange man continued to laugh, I felt a surge of anger and determination. I wasn't going to let this place or this man keep me trapped. I ran out of the gas station and back into the liminal space. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to keep moving. I ran until my legs burned and my lungs were on fire, and then I saw it. A door. It was a simple wooden door, standing in the middle of the liminal space. Without hesitation, I opened it and stepped through. I found myself back on the road, my car idling next to me. I got in, my hands shaking, and drove home as fast as I could. When I got there, I collapsed onto my bed, exhausted and relieved to be back in the real world. But as I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. I had escaped the liminal space, but I couldn't help but wonder if it had let me go, or if it was just waiting for me to return. It was a hot summer day, and I was desperate for a swim. I had heard about an abandoned pool complex on the outskirts of town, and I decided to check it out. The pool rooms, they called it. A place where people used to go to escape the heat, but now it was just a forgotten relic of the past. I arrived at the pool rooms, and I was struck by how eerie it was. The once vibrant blue tiles were now faded and cracked, and the air was thick with the smell of chlorine and mold. But I was determined to take a dip, so I found a pool that looked relatively clean and dove in. The water was cool and refreshing, and for a moment, I forgot about the strange atmosphere of the place. But as I swam, I realized that something was off. The pool seemed to stretch on forever, and no matter how far I swam, I couldn't reach the other side. Panic began to set in as I realized that I was lost in the pool rooms. The once inviting pools now seemed like a labyrinth, and I had no idea how to escape. As I swam through the endless pool, I began to see things. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and whispers filled the air. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the sound made my skin crawl. I was starting to think that I would never find my way out of this place. But then I saw a light in the distance. It was faint, but it was the first sign of hope I had seen since I got lost in the pool rooms. I started swimming towards the light, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I realized it was a door. I swam towards the door, desperate for a way out, but as I got closer still, the door seemed to shift and change. The walls became distorted, and the light flickered. I hesitated, unsure of what to do, but I really had no choice. I had to go through the door and hope for the best. As I swam through the door, I found myself in a small room. There was a ladder leading up to a hatch, and I climbed it as fast as I could. When I reached the top, I pushed the hatch open and climbed out into the sunlight. I was back in the real world, but the experience in the pool rooms had shaken me to my core. I had escaped, but the memory of the liminal space stayed with me, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the unknown. Once upon a time, in a land not too far away, there was a strange and mysterious place called the liminal space. It was a place where reality seemed to bend and twist, where the rules of time and space didn't quite apply. It was a place of shadows and whispers, where nothing was quite as it seemed. And so, our story begins with a young woman named Alice. She was a curious sort, always looking for adventure and excitement. One day, she stumbled upon the liminal space, and her life would never be the same. The first thing Alice noticed was the oddness of the place. The walls seemed to shift and change, and the floor felt like it was moving beneath her feet. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, and the only sound was the distant echo of her own footsteps. As she wandered through the twisting corridors and endless rooms, Alice began to feel a sense of unease. Something about this place just felt wrong, like it was a place that wasn't meant to be, and yet she couldn't help but be drawn in by the mystery and the unknown. As she explored, Alice came across all sorts of strange and wondrous things. There were doors that led to nowhere, and windows that looked out onto impossible vistas. There were rooms filled with strange and eerie artifacts, and others that seemed to be completely empty. But perhaps the strangest thing of all was the sense of being watched. Everywhere she went, Alice felt like there were eyes on her, following her every move. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched by something, or someone, that she couldn't see. And then, one day, Alice stumbled upon a room that was unlike any other. It was a room filled with mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of herself. As she looked into the mirrors, Alice saw herself as she was, and as she could be. But there was one mirror that was different from the rest. It was a mirror that showed her a future that she could never have imagined. In that mirror, Alice saw herself as a powerful and feared sorceress, ruling over a kingdom of darkness and despair. At first, Alice was horrified by what she saw, but as she continued to gaze into the mirror, she began to feel a strange sense of longing. A part of her wanted that power, that control. And so, she reached out and touched the mirror, and everything changed. In that moment, Alice was transformed. She became the sorceress from the mirror, and her world was turned upside down. She found herself in a new reality, one where she had the power to bend the world to her will. But with that power came a terrible price. For every act of magic she performed, Alice lost a piece of her humanity. She became cold and distant, and the people she once loved began to fear her. And so, our story ends with a warning. For in the liminal space, nothing is as it seems. It is a place of dreams and nightmares, of wonders and horrors. And those who enter do so at their own peril.